Listening is a skill that shapes your success more than talking ever will. Think about it. Most of what you learned in life didn't come from your own words. It came from hearing someone else. Every major step forward, whether in business, love, or personal growth, started because you caught something valuable in someone else's voice. Talking may get you attention, but listening gets you understanding. And understanding is what turns opportunities into outcomes. People often confuse being loud with being strong, but strength isn't proven in how much noise you make. It's shown in how much you can absorb, process, and apply. When you listen, you collect tools. When you talk too much, you give them away before you've learned how to use them. Listening builds wisdom, and wisdom builds direction. The person who listens learns the map. The one who only talks gets lost, repeating the same mistakes. Listening isn't passive. It's power under control. It's you saying, I'm open to something beyond what I already know. That's how growth happens. You can't grow while guarding your ego. Some of the most successful people in the world got that way, not because they had all the answers, but because they were humble enough to hear better ones. They sat in rooms where they didn't need to dominate the conversation. They leaned in, took notes, asked questions, and paid attention. Every conversation is a classroom if you're willing to listen. Every person you meet knows something you don't. Listening is how you uncover those treasures. When you choose to listen deeply to your mentors, your mistakes, even your intuition, you start hearing the patterns of success. And once you learn to hear what others miss, you begin to move differently. That's how listening quietly turns into living powerfully. Pride often blocks the wisdom that could change your life. Pride is that quiet voice inside whispering, I already know, when deep down you don't. It's that wall you build between yourself and the truth because you're scared of being seen as wrong, weak, or less than. But here's the real talk. Nothing shuts the door on growth faster than pride. Pride makes you deaf to advice, blind to opportunity, and stuck in the same old mistakes while calling it independence. I've seen people lose jobs, relationships, and peace of mind, all because they couldn't say, I was wrong. You ever meet somebody who always has to be right? You can't teach them anything. You can't help them because they're too busy defending their image instead of improving their life. Pride will make you argue with truth until you believe the lie is more comfortable, but that comfort comes at a price. It costs you progress. There's power in humility. Humility doesn't mean you think less of yourself. It means you think of yourself less. It means you value the lesson more than your image. When you can admit, I don't know, that's the moment you open the door for wisdom to walk in. You can't pour water into a cup that's already full. Life can't teach a person who's too proud to listen. Some of the greatest breakthroughs come right after a moment of humility. When you finally drop your guard and say, teach me, something shifts. You start hearing differently. You start growing faster. Pride builds walls. Humility builds bridges. And every time you choose humility over pride, you give yourself permission to rise higher. So if you want to move forward, don't protect your pride. Protect your progress. True listening requires humility and patience. It's easy to hear words. It's harder to pause your thoughts long enough to truly understand them. Real listening means you're not just waiting for your turn to respond. You're leaning in, trying to see the world through someone else's eyes. That takes patience because understanding doesn't always come quick. Sometimes you've got to sit with what someone said, let it settle, and look past your own opinions long enough to grasp theirs. Humility is what makes that possible. It's the quiet strength to admit that your way isn't the only way. Your truth isn't the only truth. When you listen with humility, you stop trying to win the conversation and start trying to connect. You realize that being right doesn't always matter, but being real does. And being real starts with giving someone the respect of your full attention. In today's world, patience is rare. We live in a rush, always scrolling, always reacting, always talking. But wisdom doesn't shout over the noise. It waits for those willing to slow down. Patience allows you to pick up what others miss, the tone behind the words, the emotion under the silence. Sometimes what someone doesn't say tells you more than what they do. But you'll never catch that if you're moving too fast or thinking too loud. Listening with humility and patience transforms your relationships, your leadership, and your peace. It tells people, You matter enough for me to slow down. And when you do that, walls come down, truth comes out, and trust begins. So the next time someone speaks, resist the urge to interrupt or rush to respond. Take a breath. Listen fully, because in that silence between their words, you just might find your next lesson. Every person you meet can teach you something valuable if you pay attention. It doesn't matter who they are, where they come from, or what their story is. Everyone carries a piece of wisdom shaped by their own experience. Sometimes it's wrapped in success. Sometimes it's hidden in struggle, but it's there if you're willing to look for it. The problem is too many of us overlook people because we judge their titles, their clothes, or their background. We miss the lesson because we're busy deciding who's worth learning from. Life has a funny way of using unexpected teachers. The janitor might show you more about humility than a CEO ever could. A child might teach you more about honesty than any book. A stranger on a bus could speak one sentence that shifts your entire perspective. The key is staying open. When you decide that everyone you meet has something to teach you, you stop walking through life with arrogance and start moving through it with curiosity. The book Tuesdays with Morrie reminds us that wisdom isn't always found in grand speeches. It's found in ordinary conversations if you're truly listening. Every interaction is an opportunity. Every voice holds a message. Sometimes it's what to do, other times it's what not to do. Either way, you win if you're paying attention. When you start valuing people as lessons instead of labels, your world expands. You grow wiser, kinder, and more aware. You begin to see patterns, how patience, honesty, and compassion keep showing up in the people who've mastered peace. So the next time someone crosses your path, don't just talk, listen, ask questions, observe, because the person standing next to you might be carrying the very answer you've been praying for. Every person you meet can teach you something valuable if you pay attention. It doesn't matter who they are, where they come from, or what their story is. Everyone carries a piece of wisdom shaped by their own experience. Sometimes it's wrapped in success, sometimes it's hidden in struggle, but it's there if you're willing to look for it. The problem is too many of us overlook people because we judge their titles, their clothes, or their background. We miss the lesson because we're busy deciding who's worth learning from. Life has a funny way of using unexpected teachers. The janitor might show you more about humility than a CEO ever could. A child might teach you more about honesty than any book. A stranger on a bus could speak one sentence that shifts your entire perspective. The key is staying open. When you decide that everyone you meet has something to teach you, you stop walking through life with arrogance and start moving through it with curiosity. The book Tuesdays with Morrie reminds us that wisdom isn't always found in grand speeches. It's found in ordinary conversations if you're truly listening. Every interaction is an opportunity. Every voice holds a message. Sometimes it's what to do, other times it's what not to do. Either way, you win if you're paying attention. When you start valuing people as lessons instead of labels, your world expands. You grow wiser, kinder, and more aware. You begin to see patterns, how patience, honesty, and compassion keep showing up in the people who've mastered peace. So the next time someone crosses your path, don't just talk, listen, ask questions, observe, because the person standing next to you might be carrying the very answer you've been praying for. Distractions are the enemy of understanding. In today's world, attention is constantly under attack. Your phone buzzes, your thoughts race, your to-do list screams for attention. But when you're distracted, you can't truly hear anyone, not even yourself. You might catch the words, but you miss the meaning. Listening requires presence, and presence is impossible when your mind is halfway somewhere else. You can't grasp the lesson in a moment you're not fully living in. We've gotten so used to multitasking that we call it productivity, but in truth, it's often avoidance. It's easier to scroll than to listen, easier to look busy than to be still. But stillness, that's where understanding grows. You can't plant seeds of wisdom in soil that's always shaking. You've got to quiet the noise long enough to let something take root. When you sit across from someone and truly listen, you give them a rare gift, your full attention. That's how trust is built. That's how clarity comes. But if your eyes are on a screen and your thoughts are 3 steps ahead, you're sending a message that says you're not important right now. And people feel that. They always feel when you're halfway listening. The book, The Power of Now, reminds us that the present moment is all we ever really have. Distractions pull us away from that power. The more we divide our attention, the more we dilute our understanding. Every time you silence a notification, every time you choose focus over noise, you reclaim a piece of your peace. So the next time someone speaks or life itself whispers a lesson, pause the scrolling, look up and listen. Because distraction may be loud, but truth always speaks in quiet tones, and you can't hear truth if you're tuned into everything else. Listening deeply can transform your relationships, your career, and your peace of mind. It's more than just a communication skill. It's a life-changing practice. When you truly listen, you create space for connection, healing, and understanding. People don't just want to be heard. They want to be felt. They want to know that their words landed somewhere real, somewhere safe. And when you give them that, you become someone they trust, respect, and open up to. In relationships, deep listening is the difference between growing closer and drifting apart. Most arguments don't start from what's said. They start from what's not heard. When you take the time to listen without planning your defense or forming your response, you allow love to breathe. You start to hear not just the words, but the needs beneath them, the pain, the hope, the desire to be understood. That's where connection lives. In your career, the same principle applies. Leaders who listen inspire loyalty. Teams that listen build unity. Customers who feel heard become lifelong supporters. Listening tells people you matter, and that's one of the most powerful messages you can send. The most successful people aren't the ones doing all the talking. They're the ones who listen deeply, act wisely, and speak last. And when it comes to your own peace of mind, listening to yourself matters too. You've got an inner voice that's been trying to guide you, but you can't hear it over all the outside noise. When you slow down, sit still, and listen to that quiet truth inside you, clarity shows up. You begin to move with purpose instead of pressure. Deep listening doesn't just change what you hear, it changes who you are. It turns noise into meaning, confusion into direction, and moments into connection. When you learn to listen deeply, you don't just hear life, you start living it.